You ever heard of the word Christian? Of course you have, but did you know the very first time that word was ever used was in Antioch? Let's talk about what happened and why it still matters today. So here's the scene. Back in Jerusalem, things were getting rough. Stephen had just been killed for preaching Jesus. A wave of persecution hits and believers start scattering everywhere, running for their lives. Now usually when people run, they stay quiet, they try not to make noise, but not these people. These weren't apostles, these weren't famous names. These were regular followers of Jesus, working people, families, everyday believers who took their faith with them wherever they landed. Some of them end up in Antioch. It's a big, mixed city, Jews, Gentiles, Romans, Africans, Greeks, all in one place. And instead of laying low, they start talking. They start sharing the gospel, not just with Jews, but with everybody. Bold move. Then something wild happens. Acts 11 verse 21 says, "The Lord's hand was with them, and a great number of people believed and turned to the Lord." Boom. God shows up. His hand is with them, meaning he was blessing what they were doing. People heard the message, people believed, people turned from their old ways, and it was a lot of people. This wasn't a small group meeting in a corner. This was a movement beginning to rise, right there in a city that wasn't even Jewish at the core. And that's what makes Antioch special. This is the first real multi-ethnic church. Jews and Gentiles worshiping together. That's huge. Up to that point, most people thought Jesus was just for the Jews. But here, in Antioch, the gospel crossed the line. Word gets back to Jerusalem like, hey, something's happening in Antioch. So the apostles send Barnabas to check it out. He shows up, sees the grace of God, and instead of being jealous or shutting it down, he encourages them to keep going. He's like, this is the real deal. But the work is too big for one man, so he goes to find Saul. Yes, the same Saul who once hunted Christians. Barnabas brings Saul to Antioch and they stay for a whole year, teaching and growing the church. Then comes the big moment. Acts 11 verse 26 says, "The disciples were called Christians first at Antioch." Right there. That's history. People looked at this group, Jews, Gentiles, former pagans, new believers, and said, they're different. They're like that Jesus man, Christ-like. So they called them Christians. That name wasn't just a label, it was identity. It wasn't given in Jerusalem. It didn't come from the apostles. It started with regular people whose lives looked so much like Jesus that outsiders had to give it a name. And that church in Antioch, it became one of the most important churches in the early world. When Paul started his missionary journeys, he didn't launch from Jerusalem, he launched from Antioch. When believers needed help during a famine, it was Antioch that